What is the typical approach to leadership development?
So the way most people come at leadership development is, and rightfully so, is you have to understand who you are, like your preferences, your personality, your traits and tendencies, because without that as a foundation, it's pretty hard to improve or get better. And so understanding and being more aware of the kind of person you are and who you've made yourself to be, that's kind of foundational. And then the next piece is to understand who other people are, right? How your team or your, clients or how they differ from who you are, what drives them and how they orient. And usually they're from different generations and experiences and ages and right, backgrounds and the like. So understanding them and then how most people approach leadership development is learning how to adapt and flex to those differences based on your foundation, right? So you know, one person that on your team needs to be motivated by challenge, by a swift kick in the butt, by high bar that demotivates somebody else on your team. Somebody else on your team needs to recognition, needs praise, needs approval. So you adapt and flex based on individual differences, right? Based on how you operate and how they operate. And so that's how most development works. It's not how we do things and how I think of things, but that would be the most traditional way of developing yourself as a leader and as a person.
And I wanted to start there because I've heard you talk about this at length before. So, can you explain why that typical approach is actually doing some real damage?
Well, in its foundation, there's no damage to it. It's just when people get so involved in the diagnostic, the assessment of who they are, and then they take that so seriously as to treat it as fact, as reality, and that this is the kind of person I am. I can't do that other thing, like I'm this type of a leader, and so therefore I won't even try to improve on this other area. It lets them off the hook. It actually puts them in a box. They allow themselves to stay in a box, and it basically robs them of accountability of actually getting better, right? So I want to tell you a fun story for me. I have a longstanding client, and he has a London team. And one day I facilitated an offsite for his London team, and one of his closest London associates came to me and said, "I'm so glad Paul is getting coaching," which is kind of a backhanded compliment, right? And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Have you ever worked with anyone?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, about 10 years ago, I had a coach." And I said, Was it a good experience?" He said, "Fabulous experience." And I said, "Tell me about it." And he said, "Well, he gave me one of those assessments." And I said, "Oh, well, what was the assessment?" He goes, "I don't remember the name of it, but I learned that I'm on the 99th percentile of excitable." And I said, "Well, that strikes me as kind of odd that that was useful to you because usually if you're on the 99th percentile of something, you already know that." And he says, "Oh, I knew I was excitable, but now I have the proof that I was like one of the most extremely excitable people there was." And I said, "Well, how was that useful to you?" He said, "I came right home and gave it to my spouse." And I said, "Look at my test score." And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm excitable. You need to learn how to deal with it." And so that's the classic example, right? Of funny for me, but it lets people say, this is who I am, not who I've made myself to be. This is who I'm not willing to change because this is baked in my DNA. So if there's any harm, it's not usually that's the problem. If there is a harm or a consequence that's negative to the what I call the psychological or individual difference view, it would be that. It would be that people get locked into their assessments and then they live those assessments through the future and limit their ability to grow, right? It's
Mhm.
not what I think is the biggest problem with that approach, but it definitely is one of the problems.